In sports, sometimes it's not all about how quick or how fast or how hot of a start that you may get, but more importantly, it's how you finish. Who are the real finishers, the real closers in sports? Right now, we're seeing maybe three teams in baseball alone that are just kind of taking over the sport on their, let's just say, heat check after the All-Star break. And there are several dying questions that not only we have, but I know that you guys have with college football coming up because like I mentioned last show, it is coming up right upon us. And we've got these grilling questions that we need to answer right now. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and with me today is my trusty co host, Ed Smith.
Welcome, y'all.
Ed, it's good to have you here today. David is not with us today, but don't worry. Don't worry. He'll be back, and we may see him actually here pretty soon, but he will be missed. But I really want to talk about these teams that I was mentioning in the intro with it's not how you start, but how you finish sometimes. Sometimes though it is too late. You could have quite the surge towards the end, but just a little too late. That does happen. I've seen it time and time again, and I've seen time and time again where my own team has started out so hot and well, they had a little bit of a cold streak towards the end and they blew it. Well, these teams right now, they're showing you that they're for real or they want you to look at them like that. And there's one team right off that just comes right off my head right now, and that's the Astros. And I know Ed's liking this, but at the same time, he may not like it because it is his team. And you don't want to talk too much good about one's team. But the Astros don't look now, guys. They're looking pretty good. At the time of this show, they have now just won their eighth straight game. Is that correct, Ed?
Yes, eight
And
straight
yeah,
and sweep of the Rays.
yeah, which is impressive. It doesn't matter which team you're playing. A sweep is great, and wins are great. And eight straight wins is what you need. That's a recipe for success. And they're now 15-8 since the All Star break, and they're just looking like the Astros that we're used to seeing come fall. That's just pretty much it. Is the Astros are that team that know how to show up when it matters, especially once the leaves start changing colors. It just seems that's where the magic kind of begins a little bit more. And they are a game and a half separate from Seattle. Is that correct as well, Ed?
Yeah, as of this morning, uh, they're a game and a half up on Seattle. I'm not sure what Seattle's doing this evening, so they could want. So as we're talking, they're two games up, pending what Seattle does tonight.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know things are kind of always changing with how the games are going, but this is an Astros team that there was a little bit of a question mark going into the season with Dusty Baker retiring. How was that kind of affect them with their play? Was it really going to do much? And the season didn't start out the best. I know Ed remembers it wasn't a good start to the season for the Astros, but we knew it was going to change. And in my opinion, and we talked about it on here, they made a lot of the right moves at the trade deadline, picking up a great pitcher from the Blue Jays. And I feel like that's made a lot of the difference. But their offense, Ed, what are you seeing there that's really done it?
The core of the offense has stepped up and done what the core of a great offense does.
Mhm.
They have been mashing. In fact, Alex Bregman, uh, hadn't seen his stat line this evening, but he had home runs in 4 straight games, along with Jordan Alvarez basically breaking the video board in Tampa during batting practice. They're just killing everything in sight, and it's just continuing to get better. They're riding the offense, but it's not just the offense, it is the pitching as well. We'll get to that here in just 1 second. But one thing I will mention about the offense, they're doing this without Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker has been injured since about midway point of the first half of the season, and looking at trying to get him back for the final stretch run. While the offense is working the way that it is now, that's just going to be another piece of the machine just chug-a-lugging into the postseason. Now, their competition in the AL West, the Mariners, they have had a very stout uh, pitching performance this year. In fact, number one in the AL in ERA over the course of the season, playing in one of the most pitcher friendly ballparks, and really riding this new catcher, Cal Raleigh, uh, or as they like to call him, the Big Dumper, uh, which just cracks me up every time I say it because 14-year-old mentality. What can I say? Um, but they've overcome everything between the poor offense that took place in the very beginning of the season, the bullpen just being absolute trash uh, for for a couple of months going into the season, and all the injuries that happened in the pitching staff. So to be where they are now, they have really turned the tide and become the Astros that we expected to see. And Matthew, I got to say, offense wins games, but what is it that is going to win championships?
Pitching.
Yeah, their ERA since the All Star break is 3.34. They are scoring more than 5 runs a game. That's a recipe for success. They are leading MLB in strikeouts uh, so far since the All Star break with a whip of 1.15. And to me, those two stats are the two stats that the current state of baseball really ride upon when it comes to pitching stats, and really tell you what they're doing and if they're doing a good job of it. And so far, the answer is yes. Getting into the dog days of August, then we get into September when you have your call ups come up. That the train is just moving, and and it's not just the train that's in the left field every time Bregman hits a home run. It is a train that is the rest of the American League has seen before, and they are disgustingly frightened of so far. Frightened of based upon the last 5 seasons of the Astros.
Yeah, the Astros, we've always known they've got the bats. They could easily get the bats going with the players that they have there, as you've mentioned, the likes of Alex Bregman and Jordan Alvarez, and I know we have an injured, Kyle Tucker right now, but they have the bats, and they've always been known for that. And what made this trade deadline at the All-Star break so important was that they picked up that pitching, and this pitching is showing right now. Look at these numbers that you just mentioned, Ed. That is what they were looking for. And yes, teams should be scared because if they are now balancing this out and their pitching is equally distributing as much as their offense, well, then that's a scary recipe for success. So the Astros, they're doing all the right things right now, and it's yeah, you should be a little scared in the American League right now, but there may be a team that's just as hot as them, but in the National League, when it comes to pitching since the All Star break, pretty neck and neck there, but. That's the San Diego Padres. Guys, the Padres are 18-4 since the All-Star break, and you probably haven't heard anything about the Padres, which is kind of even scarier because this is a Padres team that we saw with what they did with the luxury tax and how much money they poured into players with already having the Machados, the getting Xandar or Bogarts as well, giving him the bag and the Tatis. Well, since the All-Star break, as I mentioned, 18-4, they're just 3.5 games behind the Dodgers. And I know the Dodgers aren't having the season they had hoped to have as they've dealt with the injury bug, but the Padres being 3.5 games behind them is phenomenal. But you always have the wild card, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But the pitching is what I wanted to talk about. And here's their numbers since the All-Star break kind of compared to the Astros, which Ed just talked about, is they have a 3.03 ERA since the All-Star break, which is better than the Astros. 215 strikeouts, which is fifth just in the National League, but it's their whip that's the best in the Major League Baseball at 1.05. And this is since the All-Star break. So very similar to the Astros. We know the Padres, if they want to, if they need to, they've got some of the best bats in the major leagues. I mean, from Machado to Tatis to Bogarts, if they are hot, they could produce these offensive numbers. But now that their pitching is behind them. It just makes it more scarier. But this NL West, and we're going to talk more about this NL West. They are providing and they are producing numbers right now that come October, we may not see not only one, not only two, but possibly three teams from the NL West in representing in the playoffs.
Yeah, and not only are they not giving up much, they are doing a lot. Uh, Currently, they are scoring 5.7 runs a game versus a 3.03 ERA. That is, you can't do much better than that. There's somebody that is, but you can't do much better than that when you're talking about, what does it take to make winning baseball? And you score, you don't let the other team score. It's a very simple game. So you throw the ball, you hit the ball, you run the bases. I and sometimes it rains. But when you're talking about an offense that is uh, slashing 283 as a average, so they are getting hits when uh, the average batting average in the MLB this year is around 243. So you're talking 40 points higher uh, in batting average. That is getting people on base. That is moving people over. That is doing those little things that keep innings alive. And when you can keep innings alive, you're going to have more success. And the other thing that you do that will create better success is not striking out as much. Today's baseball, it's home runs and strikeouts with some base to base stuff going on, uh, some increases in stolen bases and stuff like that. But to have only 145 strikeouts compared to another really hot team that has 173 strikeouts, that once again, you're doing the little things that will keep you in an inning throughout every game, and then that leads to the 18-4 that you're seeing out of this team right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this next team, it reminds me similar to my team, the San Francisco Giants in 2010. I want to talk more about that and the parallels that I see there. But guys, this is the Arizona Diamondbacks, and look
Here
out,
they come again.
here they come. And Arizona really snuck up on the majors last year as they made it to the World Series. Okay, And they're starting to replicate that once again this year, especially in the latter half of the season, as they are 19-5 since the All-Star break. Same record as the Padres overall record at 68-53 as well, being 3.5 games behind LA. But Arizona, where this is the difference between Arizona and the Padres. Padres would love nothing more than to overtake the Dodgers in the NL West, win the pennant. Arizona is fine with a wild card spot. I can guarantee you that. They just want to get in. And that's the different mentality there. And that's why I like this Arizona Diamondbacks team, because it's like my 2010 San Francisco Giants team, because the team that won the World Series in 2010, they did not make the postseason until the very last game of the regular season. That's when they finally clinched it. Okay. And Arizona is going to be in a very similar path to that. I feel like come October, because you do have other teams out there fighting for that wild card spot, such as the Atlanta Braves will eventually be there too. There's going to be other teams in the NL fighting for that. But Arizona, that's where they remind me of my Giants team in 2010 by just settling for that wild card spot, and you could still win a World Series. Trust me, you could still win a World Series being there. And Arizona's got that team to do it. They're pitching, although it may not be the best numbers compared to the others. They're at 3.99 ERA with 199 strikeouts since the All-Star break, with a WHIP of 1.99. So you could already see they're pitching isn't as superior as the Padres and Astros that we just talked about. But their offense, Ed already just gave kind of kudos to the Padres for their slash. Well, Arizona's slash is just a little bit better than that.
How's slugging 529 suit you? That
It's yeah.
uh, how it is having 12 triples since the All Star break suit you? How does 23 stolen bases since the All Star break suit you? They are an aggressive offense, and it's paying off for them. I mentioned the Padres uh, scoring the 5.7 runs per game. The Arizona Diamondbacks are scoring 6.2 runs a game, almost a half run more every contest. So it doesn't matter that their ERA and is a full run more than what the Padres are doing, because they're still outscoring their opponents, and that's led to that 19-5 record so far that we've seen out of them. So getting there, you said it exactly right, Matthew. Getting there, that's all they need. It's like when you sit down at a poker table, just a chip and a chair. That's all it takes. And they've got a chip. They just want a seat at the table.
Yes, I mean they've got the best bluffing face. They can do whatever it takes to pretty much one up you. And so that's what we're seeing with this Arizona Diamondbacks team, and it's the same thing that we saw with them last year. It is a sight to see. As someone like me who naturally will root for an underdog, you love to see that with what Arizona is doing. Yes, they just want a seat at the table, but it's going to get to the point to where they need their flowers, they need their respect, because they're trying to show that this isn't just a fluke. That last year going to the World Series wasn't just a fluke for them. So Arizona doing all the right things that they need to do, and that offense is scary when you see a slash line like that. So that is something to pay attention to. We, just like the other two teams we mentioned with the Padres and the Astros. So kudos to those three teams with their hot streak after the All-Star break, because we all know the All-Star break can cause so much issues because of whether it's the extra rest or you're mentally not there because you're focused on maybe the All-Star game because you made it to the All-Star game. There are a lot of different factors. We've already heard all the different things when it comes to participate in the home run derby, your launch angle, and everything that it changes within that. So that's something to keep an eye on. But these three teams, they show that they are here for the backstretch of the regular season. So keep an eye on the Arizona Diamondbacks, San Diego Padres, and the Houston Astros as they look to close out their regular seasons. But on to college football. That's what we love to talk about here. Ed, did you have something that you wanted to add before we talk about college football?
I was just going to point out the fact that the the Padres and the Diamondbacks, they're so impressive because they can do this without anybody looking at them. The fact that they are behind the Showtime Shohei Dodgers, and the Dodgers being such a national attention franchise, that they are able to do what they need to do to get themselves into the postseason uh, without the attention the the pressure that the Dodgers put on themselves by putting all that money into their lineup has to deal with. They can just go out and play ball and just be in the moment rather than have to worry about everything around the team.
Yes, yeah, pressure. You don't want that spotlight sometimes always on you, and that's why Arizona, even though they play in the hot desert, they're comfortable being in that coolness, that shade of not having the spotlight on them. So that is a great point of pointing that out, Ed. But yes, like I said, college football. There are some burning questions that we all want to know the answers to, okay? I'm no genie. I can't give you everything. I'm no future fortune teller. I can't predict the future. If I could, I would be talking about my Steelers winning the Super Bowl or something like that, but I don't know that. I don't. But I can give you my opinion. We are all entitled to our own opinion. That is one thing that we do have. And when it comes to these questions, me and Ed have our thoughts and our opinions when it comes to that. And this first question is, well, why not? They're the defending national champs. Is the Michigan Wolverines team closer to missing the college football playoff or repeating? So, what are their chances? Are they likelier to repeat as national champions? Or are they more likelier to miss the college football playoff? And this is a great question to ask being a defending champ and all, because you would expect to continue to have that hype. But there has been a lot of things that have changed. You have now lost your head coach. You have now lost your starting quarterback, your starting running back. But you have a lot of other tangibles, a lot of other players that have been there already that are still returning. You've got a lot of recruits, you got a lot of transfer portal people coming over, but does this change it? So, Ed, I'm going to ask you the question. Is Michigan going to miss the college football playoff, or are they going to repeat? What is more likelier?
I think it's more likely that they miss the college football playoff, and not for not being a good team, but there's way more spots that I think are going to be taken by the SEC that will not allow three teams from the Big Ten to get into the college football playoff, because that's what we would be talking about at this point.
Well, and every year, even before the expansion that we're going to talk about here, is the Big Ten, which made it so tough with how they had their schedule, was it always sometimes came down to the game, which was Michigan
Uh-huh.
versus Ohio State, because they weren't going to meet again in the Big Ten championship game to then, well, repent from that loss or, make up for it. So now we've added teams such as my Oregon Ducks into the mix. we've added some other teams to this, and the Big Ten schools have gotten stronger too. Okay, keep in mind Penn State's still there, which we're going to talk about here in a few. And we mentioned this Nebraska team the other day, Wisconsin. I'm still interested to see what Luke Fickle does there, but that I think the adding teams with this expansion, such as Oregon Ducks, my Oregon Ducks, it can make things tougher for Michigan to make that. And of course, the SEC with a lot of the powerhouses that are going to be coming out of that conference too. So we have a new format. This is a 12-team playoff format that so we've done, we went from 4 to 12. Okay. There's going to be a big difference here, but you would think, well, guys, that should give Michigan more chances to make it, but it's also going to be tough at the same time with who they're going to have to compete against. So I think I also agree with Ed that it will be it's more likely that they will miss the college football playoff than repeating as national champions, and that is not because they are going to regress a lot on their team, but it's because of the other tangibles that lie with more teams in the conference and also, well, more teams in the SEC conference too, one being Texas or Longhorns, which is Ed's team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that game, second week of the season, it's going to be massive for either one of those teams. I think it it's a game that will mean more for Michigan getting into the playoff than Texas not making the playoff
Mhm.
once you get right down to it. Because the rest of the schedule for Texas, even at 10-2 with the schedule that they have going through the SEC, they could still wind up in the SEC championship game. And I think if you wind up in the SEC championship game, you've basically written your ticket into the college football playoff. It doesn't matter what the result of that game is.
Exactly, which that was one of the biggest things last year with Georgia and Alabama. Grant Alabama won it, and that it kind of changed some of the trajectory of the college football playoff because only 4 teams could get in. Whereas now, just like Ed said, that same outcome happens this year. Both those teams are making it. So
Mhm.
that's one of the advocates of making this a 12-team playoff is because of that. We were tired of the what ifs or come on, why is it always Alabama? Why you always give them a chance? Now a couple other people are going to have a chance to sit at the table.
Yeah, and finally, a group of five team I that may or may not deserve to be there, but at least you're saying there's a chance.
It's they're like the freshman or the JV, player over sitting at the varsity table or the upperclassmen, you feel cool, like, man, I made it or whatever. And then they smash your head in the spaghetti. So
Yes.
that's just how it is, but who
Yeah,
knows?
just
We've
ask
seen crazy
Liberty.
things. Just as Liberty. Yeah. Liberty Flames. So well, let's stay in the Big Ten with this next question, even though they're not that Big Ten anymore. I'm getting confused with all this, but uh,
Big a bunch of teams. Yes.
yes. Is it more important for Ryan Day to beat Michigan or win the college football playoff? I think the obvious answer for any head coach is to win the college football playoff, but well, we know that Ohio State and Michigan have this war that has been before our lifetime. I mean, our grandparents talked about it. It just went on and on and on. And this has become life or death if you live in Ohio or if you live in Michigan. And Ryan Day is now lost 3 in a row. Is it, Ed? They it is more important for not only Ryan Day, but all of Ohio State, all of the state of Ohio, in my opinion, to beat Michigan. It is so important that they do that, that they aren't even talking about the college football playoffs. Like, playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? They're talking about Michigan. They have this game circled every single year on their calendar. But this year is more important because Ryan Day, you lose this game, you're fired. Okay. We thought that already last year. We thought that's what was going to happen, was it was going to be like a Vince McMahon, you're fired moment after he lost. It did not happen. So surely this is the year that Ryan Day, you lose, you're getting the year fired. You're getting the boot, the can. So that's what it's been talked about for the most, not really any of the college football playoffs. So I might have already answered that question with that rant, but Ed, feel free if you wanted to add some more, or maybe your opinion on what is more important for Ryan Day.
Even if Ryan Day and the Buckeyes win the college football playoff and but still lose to Michigan again, then there's always going to be that cloud around Ryan Day. I think it's more important for him to beat Michigan than it is to win the playoff, because it's it's like having a war with your neighbor and they constantly get one over on you. It, you've got to be able to strike back at some point. And Ryan Day just hasn't been able to do that. So even if you wind up with like the best yard in the neighborhood or something like that, when you're competing with your neighbor, even if you won the best yard, but yet the neighbor had something really cool that was better than you, they're going to talk about the one that was really cool. They're not going to talk about yours. They're going to say yeah, but. And that seems to be Ryan Day's career at Ohio State right now. It's yeah, but. He's got one of the best, if not the best, winning percentage of any head coach in college football. Yeah, but he's lost to Michigan in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And he he can't escape it. He has to beat Michigan. It is more important for him to beat Michigan than it is to win a championship. It doesn't matter anything else that happens. If as long as they beat Michigan, he will be anointed in Columbus. Whereas if he loses to Michigan and still wins his CFP, they'll keep him around, but they won't be happy about it.
No, they will not be happy whatsoever. Like I mentioned, life or death. That's pretty much what it is when it comes to this rivalry. And 3 in a row, that's not good. Those are not good numbers there. So, that will be that every year we will pay attention to this rivalry, but even more this year because it may have more ramifications on Ryan Day's future in Columbus. So, something to keep an eye on. This one's a tough one because it may be a little contradicting as to what we might have talked about or I might have talked about last episode, but which team in the ACC has the best chance to win the college football playoff? We talked about the rankings the other day when they came out and only one ACC team being on there, and that being Florida State. At some point, you might as well just uh, talk about Notre Dame possibly being on there. I mean, pick a conference already, okay? But uh, I'm not going to say Florida State. It's tough for me to say that. If I have to choose one on here, I'm going to have to say Miami. The only reason I say Miami, and this is a long shot, but for the sake of answering the question, uh, they got two of the best transfers, in my opinion, in the transfer portal with Cam Ward and Damian Martinez. Okay. Damian Martinez pickup was such a quiet pickup that I didn't even know about it. I read it in a magazine, if I remember correctly. I'm like, what? when did he transfer there? Damian Martinez, and me being an Oregon fan, of course, I'm going to know this because he was on our rival with being on Oregon State. But Damian Martinez is a phenomenal running back. Every time I watch him play, I see Arian Foster. It is the ultimate comparison to me. And Arian Foster was a damn good running back in the NFL, undrafted, might I add. Great running back in the NFL. And I know we're talking about college football here, but Damian Martinez, I see him and I see Aaron Foster 1-1. And to have Cam Ward and him on the same team, I like those chances. But do I realistically like those chances that they're gonna win? No, but if you're gonna have me pick a team, I'm gonna go with them. So maybe a little contradicting. It may not be what people are thinking, and they may say, "Well, Florida State, Florida State, Florida State." But for me, I'm just gonna say Miami. But Miami, as long as Cristobal is there, will always shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, and for me, it comes down to which quarterback do you trust more, Cam Ward or DJU? Uh, If you we live in a world now where everything's got to be narrowed down to one choice, well, here we are. That's your choice, Cam Ward or DJU. I'm going to take Cam Ward, and that is to win the ACC. But as far as being able to make some noise in the CFP, if they get there, I think Florida State as a whole may have a better shot because they didn't get terrible in the offseason. That was an undefeated team last year. So those players that are still there have a chip on their shoulder the size of the Florida Panhandle. It's it's massive, and they would love nothing more than to show the committee that they should have been there last year, because the only way that they're going to do that at this point is by going through this year and basically having a revenge tour against the college football playoff committee. So as far as winning the ACC, I would give it to Cam Ward in Miami. But I think if Florida State can get in, they would have the best chance of an ACC team to actually win it.
I'm glad you brought it up like that. Yeah, because it's if those two teams had a chance to make it, who would make the most noise? And I think Florida State, I can see why Florida State would. And also, Mike Norvell being their head coach, too, I think gives them that upper edge versus a Mario Cristobal coach team in the college football playoff. So, by putting it like that, Ed, I could see it being like that. So, I appreciate you putting it like that. But at the end of the day, I don't see either of these teams making it. So, on a realistic note, but
One of
if
them has to.
yeah, true. I mean, with the new, sorry, my apologies, with the new format, one of them does have to, but we'll see if any of them make any noise or worthy enough to be there. Uh, and I'm going to add this question really quick since we're talking about conferences and with the new format.
Mm-hmm.
Which team do you think is, and I'm sure I know the answer already, which team in their new conference has the best chance to win their new conference?
I'm going to say Oregon.
I was shocked there because I thought for sure, not Longhorns. I thought for sure you were going to say Utah Utes.
Uh, I've got Oregon beating Ohio State uh, when they go head to head, and that's probably going to be the game that decides uh, the uh, the Big Ten.
You know
Uh,
what?
Utah, I yes, they should, uh, but there are some unknown uh, factors, if you will, in the Big 12, like Kansas State, like Arizona. They they have the opportunity to show that Utah is not just going to run the conference.
Yeah. Yeah, which I will say Utah did run a lot of the Pac-12 the last several years, so that I want to see how that does go into the Big 12. But really quick, that game with Ohio State and Oregon is going to be so fascinating because what I love about college football is you're going to go from the shoe up in Columbus to Autzen, which these are D1 football teams. Oregon's a big team. Stadium wise, cut in half.
Yep.
Like, pretty much exactly cut in half, but Autzen is very loud, and it is a very tough place to play, and I wanna see how that is. It's gonna be a different atmosphere, but they're used to the loud atmosphere playing at Beaver Stadium, playing, uh, up in, Michigan every year too at the big house, so, they're used to the loud noise, but you're getting loud noise from half the fans. That's just how Autzen's built. That's just how it's gonna be fun, but
Yep.
back to the questions, that lie, and the next one is, will Alabama take a step back without Nick Saban? This was one of the biggest questions when Nick Saban retired. Didn't matter who his replacement was going to be. It was, is Alabama going to slow down? Are they going to take a step back? This is Alabama team that made the playoffs last year, but are they going to be even, they just going to be worse without Nick Saban? Was it always him? I think Alabama somewhat already took a step back last year with Nick Saban. This was a different looking Alabama team, in my opinion, but at the same time, they still know how to make things work, and they did it just in the nick of time too to defeat Georgia in the SEC championship game and to bring them to the Rose Bowl in the playoffs where it was a neck and neck competition with the team that did end up winning it, Michigan Wolverines. So, are they going to take a step back without Nick Saban, Ed?
They will take a step back without Nick Saban for a couple of reasons. One, it has already been identified that the weakness of the Crimson Tide going into this year is the defensive secondary, which was Nick Saban's bread and butter. So that's already strike one against them. Number two, and I've talked about this before, even if you have great players, changing the offensive system from one style to a completely different style is going to take time for that to meld together. And when you have a quarterback that is a very talented quarterback like Jalen Monroe, uh, he was kind of forced to play a certain way that was more dual threat, run not as a second option, but as a 1A option. So he was designed to play like that based upon the offense that they had to run last year, based on the personnel that they had. Kalen DeBoer is coming in with an offense that went to the championship game using a passing first offense run as a last resort offense for a quarterback that's based on timing and receivers and accuracy. One thing that I question with Jalen Monroe is, will his dropbacks match with the timing of the routes that he has got to be throwing? And if he does, are they going to be on point? Because this is still a newer wide receiver core that they're breaking in at the same time. So those factors, this is why I I hesitate to say Alabama is going to be in the championship game this season. They're going to be a very good football team. Don't get me wrong here. It, Alabama is still Alabama. They are still going to just whip you up and down the field in the trenches. That's what they're designed to do. Kalen DeBoer doesn't change that. In fact, he had the best offensive line in the country when he was at Washington. So it's a matter of getting things in place, getting over Nick Saban's ability to coach certain areas of the field versus Kalen DeBoer's ability to get the offense to run the way that he wants it run. That's where we're going to see this the step back taken because they've got to regroup and learn who they are before they take the step back up to where Nick Saban had them.
Yeah, anytime you lose a goat like Nick Saban, you will naturally always take a step back, even if that's losing one more game than you did the year prior with him. That is still considered a step back. So make no mistake that naturally this team will take a step back because you're going to be without one of the greatest coaches of all time that we've seen. So that's just kind of the obvious thing. But do we think that their step back will be so drastic that they're going to be bad? No, by no means. This is going to be an Alabama team that we're still used to seeing, just without Nick Saban there. So that needs to be of note. Um, Another question that is needs this doesn't necessarily need to be asked because it does get asked quite a bit, and that is, will Penn State break through and make the college football playoff? Because it's a Penn State team in a Big Ten conference that is always just a tier behind the two above them, Ohio State and Michigan. So can Penn State with Drew Aller, can they finally do this, or is their head coach going to hold them back? Because it seems like James Franklin, he seems to always be pretty good at that. Is I love holding this team back to where they could really be. They going to break through, Ed?
It's it's the best of times, it's the worst of times when it comes to Penn State. It's the best of times because there are no divisions anymore. So without divisions, they do not get stuck playing make it. Worrying about it, can they make it past those teams? But on the flip side, you just added four teams from the Pac 12 that are either equal or better than you in the same season. So good, bad. Penn State's right back where they were to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing that they're going to be able to do to uh, break because they are just one step below those other teams that are out there uh, with your organs coming in. You even USC and Penn State, I think, are going to be on a more of an equal playing field to start with the new Big Ten. They're just not going to be in that upper tier that is going to be necessary to break through and gain those valuable spots in the 12 team playoff.
Yeah. A quick little fun fact. Me and my wife, we were out at a restaurant in Idaho. This is where I used to live, and we were in a very, very small town of Idaho. I'm talking about a population of maybe 2,000 people. And we were at pretty much the only restaurant in this town, and we were at the bar, and they had TVs up, and it was top prospects. It was high school football. And it was top prospects, and they wanted to have their games televised, and we see her old high school actually being played, and we're like, "Oh, what are the chances?" We're here. We are. We're looking at the TV, and it's her old high school that she graduated from. Well, the quarterback playing in that game was none other than Drew Aller, and this was before he was at Penn State because he was still in high school, but they put on there that he chose to go to Penn State for college, and he was one of the top quarterbacks coming out. And I just thought it was so crazy. Here we are in this little town in Idaho, 2,000 population, and we look up and we see her old high school, and now here we are talking about this guy Drew Aller and Penn State, and Drew Aller does have I don't want to say an it factor, but Drew Aller does have a factor. I have seen that with Drew Aller that he could be a quarterback that could lead this team. And I would love to see that because Penn State seems like they struggle to get over that hump because I love seeing more competition. I do. I would love for the Big Ten to have Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and shoot, even Nebraska well representing a conference because of how competitive it was and how tough it was because iron sharpens iron. So, will we see that? Probably not. But uh, I do think Penn State will eventually break through this door that's in front of them that they just need to get through. Just don't know when we'll
Yeah,
see it.
it's been a tight window trying to get in the house, and
Yeah.
it it didn't get better and it didn't get worse for them.
Yeah, very true, very true. But speaking about better or worse, you knew we were gonna have to bring them up eventually, and that's prime time. That is what will the Sanders, plural there, Sanders do second season in Colorado. So we got all the Louis, we got all the luggage, we got prime time with the man's beard now. We got Warren Sapp down there. Colorado, the Buffs. What will they do in their second season there? Because last year it was all lights were on them. We all heard the famous saying by Dan Lanning, they're playing for clicks. All right. Well, what's it going to be like in Colorado this year? And for me, if I could explain it in a movie scene, it reminds me of the movie Grown Ups 2, where uh, Adam Sandler's son's over there kicking these field goals. He wants to try out for the team, and then he's making them. He's looking good. All eyes are on him, and then Adam Sandler falls on him, breaks his leg, and well, there goes that kid. Okay, well, that was what like it was with Colorado last year. They couldn't win games. They were struggling. Well, I don't want to say couldn't win games. They had so much hype on them that when they started playing real opponents, that you saw the struggle, and now it's not as much on them as it was, but as long as prime time's there, the eyes will still be on them. So, what will they do in their second season? I'm gonna say pretty much what they did last year.
Well, I mean, they doubled their win total.
Yeah,
That's two.
2.
And when they go into this season with expectations of doing two things. One, getting Travis Hunter and Shador Sanders drafted in the first round. That's goal number one. Goal number two is to get to a bowl game, which I think they double their win total again, but that's still only four. And the reason why I'm saying that they can get to four is, to be quite honest, the Big 12 was a step below the Pac 12 from last year. So it's a different level of competition. Nothing bad about the Big 12. That's just where the whole of the teams in the Pac 12 before this merger has taken place is a little bit below where all those Pac 12 teams were just a season ago. So I can see maybe four wins, maybe five, and considering how many bowl games there are out there, if they're having trouble finding a team to put in a bowl game to get viewership, because that's what these bowl games are looking for more so than people in the stands is viewership, then Colorado would make a bowl game at that point.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there. So, I think that's pretty much their ceiling. Their cap is maybe 4 or 5. So, but their main goal is keeping Travis Hunter, Shadur healthy, get him drafted in the first round. So I think without saying the selfish part out loud, that's pretty much what their goal is. But we'll see. Maybe the narrative will change a little bit. But uh, expectations, and these are realistic expectations. I'm just going to ask you, Ed, being the fan, what is the realistic expectations for Texas?
I struggle with this question for a couple reasons. One, I don't want to hype up my own team so much so where it becomes unrealistic.
Mhm.
But I also want to celebrate how far Texas has come as a program to be within the conversation of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country. So I find myself in a bit of a quandary. Now knowing that we now have 2 running backs that are out for the season with with leg injuries, I that puts a damper on it. But I have said consistently that I see Texas being at 10-2 or 9-3, not 11-1, not 12-0, and I think that puts them in the playoff. But I don't know how much further they go on beyond just being in the playoff, just like they did last year. I think a cap for them is going to be in the semifinal, but I think their below is going to be uh, the last at large bid in the playoff. So just a very narrow window that seems pretty consistent across the board when we're talking about Texas. So I think that becomes the realistic expectation. Just having them in the playoff, that is going to be the baseline that I'm putting out there.
Yeah, and I can see a similar path for them because pretty much what they did last year. I think it was a good blueprint of showing what they're going to be bringing to the SEC. They did deal with adversity last year with injuries, and we saw what happened with Jonathan Brooks going down. We saw what happened when Quinn Ewers went down as well with an injury. They rallied together. They pulled off these wins, and that's what they are. Is that they got these wins, and you can't take wins for granted. And that's what they were able to do is collect the wins and get there. And I could still see that happening this year, even though they've dealt with the injuries. No injury is good news whatsoever. But the good news, the silver lining to it is that it's happened now so they can prepare for it for the rest of the season versus halfway through or 3/4 of the way through. That does become more of a bigger blow. So losing them now, they can now plan a little bit more strategically, obviously, without them in the game plan. But it's still tough, regardless. Losing 2 running backs is going to be tough to replace. But one of the final questions here, and a lot of people have been asking because it seems to be the question that gets asked the last couple years is Georgia or the field, Ed?
I'll take Tiger. I'm kidding.
You'll take Tiger.
I'll take Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah.
Uh, at this point, you got to take the field
Mhm.
because there's that many teams that are so close to being there, and just 1 or 2 breaks, uh, they overtake Georgia.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually making us pick, you got to take Georgia all day. I
Yeah.
mean, that's they have earned that right to be in the catbird seat,
Yeah.
and I don't see how you don't take Georgia. But the field is just it's just that just it's a hair. It's a hair difference.
Yeah.
But Kirby Smart has Georgia's program just it's just different. It is as good as every other team in the country is. Especially that top 6 or 7 that we talked about in the top 10.
Mhm.
They're just different than everybody else. And when you see just you can visually see a team just be that different at the upper level. You have to go with them. So I'm taking Georgia.
Yeah. When they show you who they are, you continue to believe them. That's the thing, and you can't sit here and doubt them, and that we're not going to. It is a very slim difference between Georgia and the field right now, to the point of 51-49, and you're right there because we do have an expanded playoff now too, so that could have a factor, but Georgia has shown you who they are for the last several years, and you just have to believe them at this point. So, uh, Georgia or the field, Georgia. So, but I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say when it comes to these questions, because these are pretty big questions here. So, drop in the comments your answers to these questions we had, and if you have a question of your own, feel free to drop that in there, and we'll be glad to answer that on the next show, or even reply to you in the comments, letting you know that. But we talked about college football. We talked about how it is turning to fall, and there is a lot of talk happening right now. Opinions are being shared when it comes to fall and one particular topic in the fall. And I feel like there is no better person to share how they feel than this guy that you may see at your local street corner. And that is none other than David Street. And this is what he has to say.
All right, so we all saw that tweet that went viral. I think the dude's name was Fred, and it said something along the lines of, "I can't stand the no weddings during fall people," and it got a lot of pushback. But this is going to be unpopular, but I actually agree with the guy, or I agree with the sentiment at least. If you miss the wedding of an acquaintance or just someone that you haven't spoken to in years, I'm not saying, like, I'm not advocating for that, but that is at least understandable. That's one thing. But if you miss the wedding of a close friend or family member, to me, it's just an all-around bad look to say, "Hey man, I know we're close, and I know this is a big day for you, and hopefully it's something that happens just once for you, but man, I gotta miss it. I gotta watch my team's game, which will surely happen the next year, and the next year, and the next year, and I know I can also DVR it. Oh, and there's all these other games with teams that have no significance to me whatsoever. So sorry, buddy, I'm gonna have to miss your big day." Now, you might think that I'm saying this just because I'm a fan of a team that's been below average the past few years. You can think that. I don't care. My brother got married in the fall, and I'm very close with my brother, and I was the best man. You think I was going to miss his wedding just because of some game or some games? Absolutely not. And my cousin is getting married in October, and I'm going to be there. My cousin and I, growing up, both of our families hung out every summer, and we don't really, talk a lot, particularly because we live in different states, but he's still someone that I consider dear in my life. So I am going to be at his wedding, all right? If you don't want to get married in the fall, cool. It's your wedding. Do whatever you want. All I'm saying is that for me personally, a game is never, ever going to come before the people I'm close with, okay? My priorities are God, family, friends, and then everything else, all right? Straight out.
Well, there you have it. None other than David Street himself and Street Corner. And, you know, he brings up a great point. He really does, because this has been such a topic that's been talked about for a while now. And it could just be where you're from, too. I personally know someone who is from the deep South. He is from Montgomery, Alabama. Okay. And he tells me all the time, Matthew, it is Alabama Crimson Tide football. That is what it is in the fall. There is nothing else. There's nothing other than Alabama Crimson Tide football. He said, I have gone to one wedding before while the Crimson Tide were playing, and the entire time I had a little pocket radio listening to the game, didn't pay a single attention to the wedding. And he'll straight up tell me that. He will be honest about it. And there's a lot of people I know that are like that too. So for me though, I would never be like that. I got married in the fall. Me and my wife got married last year, October. We got married on a Friday though. Didn't have to miss my Oregon Ducks game. That was a plus. We ended up playing on Saturday, but we lost to Washington, so that did kind of suck. But uh, in the end, I agree with David with what he's saying that it a game should not be more important than someone's wedding, especially someone that you are very close with, or whether it be a family member or even if you're in the wedding. I think that it is important to be there at that wedding. So to me, that's where I sit on that. That's where I stand on that. But I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say and where you stand when it comes to it, because this seems to be a pretty big topic happening right now. Is th- w- should you miss a wedding in the fall, or should you have a wedding in the fall? So, um, yeah, that's pretty much where this topic is going. So please let us know how you feel, what your thoughts are on it. But guys, I just want you to please continue to hit that like and subscribe button. We really do appreciate your support and all that you do when it comes to our channels. Share these videos, let people know kind of what we're about and what we bring, and just hopefully we are helping you with your fan experience to sports, because that's what me and Ed have always thrived off on, is these shows, is being able to talk to you guys, be on a more personal level. So continue to support this show, guys. We really appreciate it. But until next time, guys, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.